So now that I have a sense of how Unity is organized, how it's laid out, and how to interact with the primary scene interface, I want to start to experiment with creating my own project and translating an early map sketch into a Unity 3D environment. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a new project in Unity. Now before I do, I just want to point out that I'm working to an external hard drive, and on that external hard drive I've created a class folder, VCND2816. I'm going to save the project that I'm working on into the root of this project folder. Now I do have some extra resources, and I have my map folder where I'm creating, some basic map sketches. So I have some existing resources and assets in here, but I'm going to create a project called Island Test. And again, the intent of this project is just to experiment and get some experience under my belt with attempting to translate an early map sketch into the 3D environment. So I'm going to go back to Unity. I'm going to click on the Unity interface, and I'm going to choose File, New Project. When I choose New Project, I get the New Project wizard that pops up. I'm currently in the Create New Project. Alternatively, I could open an existing project. The project directory defaults to a directory that I don't like, so I'm going to set this to my external hard drive, to my class folder, and I want to save this with my intended project name. So I'm going to call this Island Test. And I'm really looking at this as kind of a disposable project, something that allows me to make a few mistakes so that I can, with more intention, create an appropriate project too. So again, I'm not too concerned about some of the decisions that I'm going to make at this point. I just want an environment that I can experiment with. I'm going to save, and just underneath the project directory we have these packages that we can import, and we can import them by checking them. There's some important packages. These are pre-existing assets that come packaged with Unity, and we want to leverage these assets in the creation of our projects. And so I'm going to check everything on this list, with the exception of anything that says mobile, and there's only one item in here that says mobile. And also, I don't need this tessellation shader for DirectX 11. So I'm going to go through and just quickly select all of these objects. I'll skip mobile. Now, if we inadvertently forget to check something, it's okay. There's another way that we can manually import once we get a scene. But initially, it's a little bit easier to do it, I think, for the first time when you generate your project. Now, I'm going to create my project. And I do want to point out that, just to remind you that I created a VCND2816 folder. I have some existing assets inside this folder, and I'm telling Unity to create a project called Island Test. So it will establish an Island Test folder for me when I create this project. So I'll hit Create Project. I don't want to save any changes that I might have inadvertently made to the demo project. So I'll make sure to choose Don't Save. And so you can see Unity is doing its thing. It's gonna take a while to generate and import the packages. It'll take a few minutes, but you can see that it already established my Island Test folder. And once Unity is done importing all the assets that we requested, it's going to present us with the default Unity interface, and then we can start creating content. I'm going to pause this while it's creating so we don't have to watch it create, and I'll get back with you just as soon as the project's established. So I've established my Island Test project, and if I look around the Unity interface, I can see at the top in the title bar it says Untitled. I'm working on an untitled scene inside my Island Test project. Now the interface probably looks a little bit cleaner now because we don't have so many assets inside our hierarchy view, and again we're presented with this Welcome to Unity screen. So I'm just going to close the Welcome to Unity screen, and I'm temporarily going to hide Unity and take a look and see what Unity created for me inside my project folder. So through the project wizard, it established an Island Test folder. And if I look inside the Island Test folder, there are 4 folders, and we can ignore just about every one of these folders with the exception of the assets. Now when I look inside the assets folder, I see another folder called Standard Assets. The standard assets, these are all of the packages that I imported at the beginning of my project. And so if I look inside the standard assets, you can see that I have things like character controller, light cookies, skyboxes. These are all the things that we told Unity we wanted to utilize when we created the project. Now, if I jump back into Unity, I want to point out that if I look down here at my project tab, I'm looking inside my asset folder by default, and inside my assets folder is a standard assets folder. This is a mirror or an alias, or it points directly to my assets folder inside my system finder. So you can see that if I just go into my assets folder and I right click inside this column and I create a new folder, and I'll even leave it untitled, if I go back to Unity and I look inside my project panel, inside my assets folder, I now have an untitled folder that's been generated there. So I can interface directly through the Finder or through this project panel to create and establish assets to reorganize content. I can create, modify, and delete assets. If I right-click on the assets folder, I can create different kinds of assets directly through the Unity interface. If I want to delete an asset, I can select that content, right-click, and choose to delete. Unity will warn me that I'm about to delete an asset. Once I delete that, now if I go back and look at my assets folder, you can see that that folder is now gone. Inside my assets folder is a standards asset, and if I go back to Unity and I look inside my standard assets, I have all these different assets or these different packages that Unity has provided with me. So I got a couple different ways to navigate this content. I have my assets folder, my standard assets, and I can start to utilize these little triangle drop-down menus here to start to access my content. So when I get to the point where I want to start to integrate things like particles or different kinds of scripts or skyboxes, I'll have these preview items that start to make themselves available inside this panel. So I'm just going to collapse this just for a moment, and I'm going to draw your attention back to the scene view. At this point inside my scene, I don't have anything going on, with the exception of I have a default main camera inside my scene. And if I select it, you can see that it's highlighted and it's pointing out into space, and there's nothing there to see in the first place. So just to get oriented inside this space, I want to give you a quick overview of some of the content that's available in the drop-down menus here. And the first thing that I'm going to take a look at is this game object drop-down menu. Now, when we want to create basic assets inside Unity, we can use this game object drop-down menu and choose to create other. And from this menu, we can choose things like basic lighting and some basic 3D shapes. So just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to choose game objects, create other, and I'm going to create a simple cube. And when I do that, you can see that a simple cube pops up inside the scene view. And I'll use this cube just to kind of manipulate it a little bit and talk to you about what we're looking at inside the inspector editor. So when I chose to create this cube, you'll notice that I get a cube that pops up inside the scene view. Over in the hierarchy menu, I get an object name cube, and by default it's selected. If I deselect it, you can see that the axes handles go away. It's no longer highlighted in the hierarchy view, and I lose information in the inspector panel. If I want to select this object again, I have two choices. I can click on the object directly in the scene view, which is not a best practice. What I want to do is I want to use the hierarchy menu when possible to click on to select the objects. It's going to be a lot cleaner of a selection. It's going to be a lot more organized. So I'll recommend that you use the hierarchy view to make your selections. Once my object's selected, I can confirm that it's selected because I see the axes bands that are selected here. And by default, this allows me to move it and restrict its movement to one axis as long as I'm using one of these dedicated axes. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the inspector viewport and take a deeper dive into what we're looking at, but we'll do that in the next presentation.